started just welcoming everybody into this final iteration of our series for this year, how to interpret images, part of the ARWA Archaeology in Action, Art History and Visual Studies series of lectures that Christina Tsouparopoulou was invited to do and then invited me to join her. And it's been a real pleasure to host these lectures, I must say. We've got really good discussions and excellent presentations. And I'm sure that our final lecture by Alessandro Poggio is not going to disappoint at all. Alessandro is, well, I will let you explain perhaps the institution that you work at, IMT. Well, I'll just say it's a doctoral program study center or university. I'm not quite sure what the terminology would be in English for it.
It's a school for advanced, I mean, it's a
It's
public
an advanced study
university.
school.
Yes, but it's a public university in the
Yes.
public system.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, in Lucca,
Yes.
and he is an expert on the art and archaeology of Lycia in the Mediterranean and Anatolian contexts, looking at social dynamics and self-representation. His book is a real must-read, especially for putting Lycia in relation to the Phoenician dynasts that are contemporary, but also other contemporaries as well, and thinking about the identities that are evident in the sculptured, usually the sculptured monumental tombs of Lycia. It's a great pleasure for him to deliver this lecture. And without further ado, I will hand over to him to look at images to understand social dynamics in the 4th century BC Eastern Mediterranean. Thanks, Alessandro.
Thank you very much, Catherine, for your kind presentation. And I would like to thank you and Christina for having me in such a stimulating series of lecture. I'm very honored to be part of this program. And I would like to thank all of you for joining us today. Um, so, images are part of the social discourse. They can convey several useful information on the socio-historical context that have produced them. A particular fruitful analysis involves multiple aspects: the choice of specific iconographies and their manipulation, the style, but also the materials used. This is valid for different chronologies. In Roman funerary art, for instance, the patron clearly defines his social position through the decoration, size, and location of the tomb. Such a complex analysis appears particularly useful in ancient contexts for which we don't have enough information from other sources. In this talk, I will be presenting some case studies from the 4th century BC Eastern Mediterranean, notably southwestern Anatolia, present-day Turkey. These territories, sorry, in these territories included into the Achaemenid Persian Empire and at the crossroad of complex intercultural contacts, experienced unique artistic dynamics. Just few words to set the scene. From the mid-6th century BC, the Persians became the new protagonists of the Near East. Persian hegemony, indeed, stretched over the largest empire yet seen, from Central Asia to the Mediterranean. By the end of the 6th century BC, the entire eastern basin of the Mediterranean was under the same power. As scholarly debate has shown, it is no longer possible to regard the Persian Empire as invisible. Rather, the variety of political and administrative solutions it adopted enabled different levels of autonomy and cultural identity to coexist. The empire's main administrative units were the satrapies, where the representative of the central power was established. This system, however, did not supplant the local powers. An emblematic picture of the coexistence of different rulers, generally defined as dynasts, in the Eastern Mediterranean within the Persian Empire is provided in Herodotus' account of the Second Persian War. These figures, in fact, would have participated personally in the conflict. In other words, there were numerous dynastic courts along the shores of the Eastern Mediterranean under the Persian Empire. Their attractiveness on artists and intellectuals contributed to developing a complex supraregional network. Court studies, which have developed extensively in recent years, both on ancient and the modern sites, provide useful methodological tools. For instance, Norbert Elias' sociological research based on the court of the Sun King Louis XIV of France interpreted court etiquette as an instrument of domination. Complex rules for ceremonial protocol regulated the tension and rivalries within the court. This model was well received, but also attracted criticism, notably for the image of an elite powerless against an omnipotent sovereign. Nevertheless, bearing in mind the necessary caveats, at a methodological level, this model is still fundamental for approaching those ancient societies characterized by a strongly hierarchical structure, as was the Persian case, and on a smaller scale, as we will see, the Eastern Mediterranean dynastic societies. A well-defined corpus of 4th century BC funerary monuments attributed to the local rulers of the Western Persian Empire are among the most relevant evidence of these societies. These tombs were lavishly decorated with complex figurative programs related to the life of these important personages and their retinues, with battle, hunts, bucket scenes, or connected with the mythical sphere. Whether rulers' tombs can reveal details of the organization and management of the dynastic court flourishing in the 4th century BC Eastern Mediterranean is among my research interests and is the central theme of this talk. First, in this investigation, it is key the analysis of iconographies. Talking about how images are the mirror of societies in this context, in my view, the best example I can show you is the case of the banquet of the Nereid monument of Xanthos. This marble temple-like tomb standing on a limestone podium was erected at the beginning of the 4th century BC at the southern edge of the site of Xanthos, the most important settlement in Lycia. This monumental tomb was richly decorated by sculpted friezes and pediments and freestanding sculptures. Therefore, it has been attributed to a local ruler. Just to okay, yes. Yes, let's move on to the banquet scene, which was decorated by a series of 10 clini, more or less. I mean, this is the situation we have now. So we have different slabs which form a long frieze. Of course, it's not entirely preserved, but we can see that 8 clinae accommodate 2 guests, while 2 show only 1 each. At first glance, the gathering at Xanthos resembles a Greek symposium with a crater on the left and the guests sitting in pairs. Nevertheless, only the general atmosphere of the symposium theme is maintained, since several details refer to the local ideology. The participants are not of equal social status. The banqueter on the slab, that is considered the central element of the long frieze, stands out for its majesty, for its larger size, and for its specific attributes. The figure wears a long beard, and his head is crowned with a diadem. A dog is crouched beneath his cline. One foot rests on a pillow. He holds in his hands a sumptuous riton and a bowl, and he is depicted frontally. This wealth of attributes was intended to assist in the recognition of the dynasty. The central role played by the principal figure in the composition of the scene is also significant, since he is shown surrounded by a counselor or messenger and his retinue of servants. As you know, feasting and conviviality played a relevant role in defining social hierarchies in ancient societies. In this vein, the banquet representation of the Nereid monument is particularly telling. This local version of the symposium, in which Greek iconography with adjustments provides a visual model for the dynastic ideology of that area, fits with the hierarchic arrangements of couches in the 4th century BC Andrones in Labranda, an important sanctuary in the neighboring region of Caria. These buildings were patronized by the local dynasty, the Achaemenids. In these banqueting halls, ritual or ceremonial meals were held. Each of these buildings was likely able to host 20 clinae. However, its marked axiality, their marked axiality favored the presence of a couch for distinguished diners placed against the rear wall and surmounted by a niche. Going back to the banquet frieze of the Nereid monument, noteworthy is the large number of servitors, at least 13, who are depicted according to a precise hierarchy, like the banqueters themselves. Among them, at least 2 butlers, and here you see one in the middle of this slab, organize the other servants. These figures are focal points of the long frieze and the coordination of service. And so we have 2 levels of, let's say, hierarchical organization, the banqueters and the servants. Each of these layers, let's say, are organized in a hierarchical system with the dynast, of course, and also the butlers at the top of this pyramid. The primary goal of the banquet scene of the Nereid monument is the self-representation of the dynasty, with many guests in his home, efficient and well-organized serving staff, and precious furnishings, including rita. So, the symposium iconography here is manipulated in a local reinterpretation. The egalitarianism in the Greek symposium, a principle embodied by the crater as a shared mixing vessel, is broken by the majestic solitude of the dynasty, depicted with proportions and attributes that set him apart from the other participants. And of course, I have mentioned the other participants who is reclining alone, and one interpretation is that it could be a member of the dynasty family. So, in this frieze, the coexistence of the crater and the precious rita of the banqueters in a homogeneous style perfectly embodies the so-called Greco-Persian art. And here, of course, you have just two examples, let's say, which embody the vessels I'm mentioning for the narrated monument. All these points to court hierarchy and etiquette related to banqueting. One can draw an analogy to the Persian central court, where the royal meal was a social and political event related also to the redistribution of commodities within the court. A passage from the ancient author Athenaeus testifies to the fact that after dinner, the great king used to drink with some guests, but, I quote, they, the guests, do this sitting on the floor, whereas he, the king, lies on a couch with gold feet, end of quote. So during the banquet of the Persian king, in this late phase of the banquet, there was a clear visual distinction of the social and political role. So we have analyzed an iconography where a clear hierarchy within the local court is represented. Now I would like to move on to another iconography that allows us to understand other aspects of the socio-historical dimension of this context, which is hunting. And I would like to start with the Heron of Trisa, which is one of these monumental funerary tombs in southwestern Anatolia. So dynastic funerary monuments of this area generally show a sequence of hunting episodes assembled in the same continuous figurative frieze. So here you have actually three say registers, but you have to figure out that we have just only two long friezes with the upper part and the lower part in a unique sequence. So the hunting frieze is the upper frieze of each section. Each episode focuses here on one or more prey from the same species and appears independent and self-enclosed. Here we have 9 episodes. This hunt iconography, called multiple pori hunt, appears in this area entirely distinctive in the 4th century BC. On the one hand, this new iconography is connected to the increased availability of surface areas to be decorated. So we have large monuments and we have a lot of space to be decorated. On the other hand, each prey embodies specific values that the hunter must be able to demonstrate. On these monuments, the prevailing technique shown is that of the encirclement, which by definition requires the prey to be surrounded by a number of participants. So the number of participants is one of the main features of these hunting scenes. The most crowded multiple pori hunts are those on the 2 long sides of the socle of the mourning women's sarcophagus of Sidon. 23 hunters are depicted on frieze A and 24 on frieze B. There are 4 hunting scenes on each of these friezes, all with a group of 5 to 7 hunters arranged around 1 or 2 prey. Conversely, in Lycia, it is the narrated monument that presents the largest hunting group. And again, the hunt is by encirclement, specifically 4 horsemen and a man on foot, both in the bear and the boar hunting scenes. So you see the bear and the boar. The third element of the frieze is part of the hunting representation, but it is not a hunt scene per se. So if we go back to the Trisa release, in this case, none of the 9 hunting scenes are very crowded. But in the same monument, on the opposite wall, the representation of the Caledonian boar hunt, so we are in a mythical sphere, has numerous participants and seems to be inspired in this kind of manipulation of the tradition of the representation by the genre of the dynastic hunts. In Persia, the great king did not hunt alone. The whole court was involved. Nevertheless, only his closest companions and courtiers had the honor of accompanying him on the actual hunt. Indeed, Plutarch lists the exceptional privileges that Themistocles enjoyed at the Persian court and mentions attendance at the royal hunts. So the hypothesis is that on our monuments in the Western Persian Empire, we have the main hunter, the dynast, surrounded by friends and dignitaries who belonged to the restricted circle of the ruler's close coterie and assisted him in various ways. However, if the main hunter is clearly identified as the dynast on the satrap sarcophagus of Sidon here, and on the sarcophagus of Milasa, elsewhere, the compositional strategies can help distinguishing the personage, not the attributes. As for Lycian dynastic monuments, the multiple quarry hunts show a different treatment in comparison with other themes, as the case of the Nereid monument can clarify. As we have seen, the figurative program of this tomb displays the repeated figure of the dynast in different situations. We have considered his representation as a banqueter inserted into a precise hierarchy. Another representation of the dynast on the Nereid monument is this one, where he is depicted as a leader performing his military duties, in this case, talking with ambassadors. And here, the identification of the dynast is very clear, thanks to a cluster of attributes like the parasol, the throne, the footrest, and also the beard, of course. Here, I mean, of course, the slab is not entirely preserved, but I mean, we have a lot of attributes allowing us to clearly identify the dynast. It may appear, therefore, surprising that the hunting scene on the same monument apparently do not show relevant elements that can recall the dominant role of the dynast if we assume that he is taking part in the hunt. The only one is the compositional strategy and the layout of the frieze, because here we have in these two hunting scenes, we have a bear hunt and a boar hunt. The geometrical center of these two slabs are not the prey, which are the center of the actions, but are these two horsemen. And actually, if we accept the present display of the monument, these horsemen is in line with the eastern pediment of the monument, where the dynasty is represented with the family. So the fact is that in the other situations, the banquet and the audience scene on the socle of the narrated monument, the dynasty is well identified. So here probably we have an intentional lack of concentration of attributes for the hunting scene. So the hypothesis could be that this intentional treatment of the dynasty and the other, let's say, dignitaries in the hunting scenes could be connected with court etiquette. Lycia, as you may know, was characterized by an aristocratic society in which the dynastic power was hereditary and legitimized by family ties. On the one hand, epigraphic evidence shows that the importance of ancestors in dynastic self-representation. On the other hand, the relationship with the other living members of the family was also important. Lycian dynastic tombs, in fact, show that the immediate, the family was part of the dynastic self-representation, as shown by the eastern pediment of the Nereid monument. Moreover, it is known that there was a practice of power sharing among members of the dynastic family in Lycia. The dynasty of the inscribed pillar, a 5th century BC funerary monument in Xanthos, declares that he shared the power with his kinsmen. I quote, he gave part of the kingdom to his kinsmen. So presumably by maintaining a prominent position. So such a collaborative aspect of the rulership could be reflected in some way in the iconography of multiple quarry hunt. In the context of these hunting representations, as we have done for a banquet, we have to stress that an important part is played also by other participants in the wider team. So we have, for instance, a person playing an instrument to give the signal that indicates that the prey could be, is ready, is surrounded by hounds. We have a servant carrying a slain prey, and also we have servants with weapons. So we have, let's say, the intention to depict again all the layers of the court. And another essential figure was the one training and caring after the hounds, so the kynagogos in ancient sources. And we have here a clear representation on the mourning women's sarcophagus with this figure, which is shown with a direct relationship with the hound. And also possibly, but not in a very certain way, also on the realm of Trisia. And as attested by Arrian, hounds should be obedient to the man who leads them in the hunt in the same way that subjects obey the sovereign, almost intuiting his intentions. So it is clear also that the careful depiction of the hunting theme is related to the image of the dynasty. At a political level, Eastern Mediterranean hunting images imply a well-structured system. These crowded scenes convey complex messages related to the dynast's power and the management of a large retinue. One may also infer that hunt groups were managed by a miniature government and whose functioning reflects the ways in which the dynasty exercised power. Given the lack of literary given, yes, we don't have abundant literary sources for Eastern Mediterranean, so hunting scenes for this area constitute an exceptional tool for decoding the structure of local courts and more generally of dynastic societies within the Persian Empire. So we have so far considered how certain iconographies can tell us about social dynamics, hierarchy, distribution of power, court management. However, it is always useful to use different methodologies that can equally investigate social hierarchies and habits. So let us leave the individual iconographies and let's focus on the topographical location and materiality of these monuments. What can they tell us? To do so, we move to another southwestern Anatolian core, which was among the most important centers under the Achaemenid rule. So Halicarnassus, the capital of Caria, which was refounded when Mausolus moved the capital from Mylasa, an inland center where an astonishing dynastic tomb has been recently investigated and that I will not consider today. I've mentioned it before. So the most imposing buildings were Mausolus' tomb, the mausoleum, and his palace. The mausoleum of Halicarnassus, as you know, was built at the urban center of Halicarnassus in the mid-4th century BC with a complex architecture, actually not entirely clear, but I mean, according to the literary sources, we know that it consisted of stepped podium with a Ionic colonnade surmounted by a stepped pyramidal roof. As usual, let's say, as the other tombs, it was decorated with marble sculptures. Here you have a very brief overview of some theme, so the Amazonomachy, the Centromachy, and representation also of the ancestors of the Achaemenid family. The size of the monument made it visible from the sea. Mausolus' political, strategic, and architectonic action had a pivot in maritime power. In fact, the coastal strip was once again assuming a strategic role for the Persian Empire in the 4th century BC after the so-called Peace of the King and after the foundation of the Second Naval League by Athens in 377 BC. Looking at a broader horizon, however, one can see how the sea played an increasingly important role in the iconography of power of other regions of southern Anatolia. For instance, in the neighboring region of Lycia, which I've considered before. The Nereid monument of which we have analyzed the hierarchical composition of the banquet and the collaborative dimension of the hunt, was certainly among the first representative buildings visible to those approaching Xanthos from the coast. The privileged role of the Nereid monument in the urban landscape was certainly intentional. This monument marked a difference from the earlier tradition of the so-called pillar tombs, which until the end of the 5th century BC were erected at the foot of the Acropolis. While the position of the Nereid monuments projected the monument itself in direction of the coast. Another distinctive element of this tomb was the evocation of the marine element in the rich decoration. The freestanding statues that probably decorated the intercolumniation represented female figures with sea animals and shells. They are generally identified as Nereids, hence the name given to the monument. Regardless of their precise identification, it is significant that this reference to the marine element appears in a context in which the coastal areas of the Western Persian Empire gained in importance, as we have seen also for the mausoleum of Halicarnassus. And we have also an importance of the sea in the figurative program of the Heron of Trisa. So in the southern Anatolia of the 4th century BC, the sea became a full part of the representation of dynastic power, the center of gravity of a new political phase, capable of determining the life of settlements. It assumed an important role in funerary figurative programs as well. Mausolus' action in Halicarnassus, with the relocation of the capital to the coast and the construction of his own tomb in close visual contact with the sea, can be fully understood within this broader framework. The coastal position of Halicarnassus facilitated the supply of prestigious materials for the majestic building program. Various marbles for which transport by sea was the preferred means. In other words, the sea played the role not only as a landscape of political power, but also of economic prestige. Archaeometric analysis conducted in the past years has ascertained that a combination of different qualities of imported marble from distant sources was used for the mausoleum, despite the fact that Caria had its own supply of white marble. So Pentelic marble, quarried near Athens, the famous lignites from the Cycladic island of Paros, perhaps Proconnesian marble. And we know from literary sources that slabs of Proconnesian marble were used also for the palace of Mausolus. This supply of stone materials constituted a significant logistical effort. Pentelic marble and lignites had to be transported across the Aegean for several nautical miles. The transport of the Proconnesian marble had to follow the circumnavigation of Western Anatolia along the Aegean coast. Owing to its workability and brilliance, crystalline marble was preferred over limestone for sculpture and architecture, and thus not only was it used in the regions with easy access to quarries, but it was also widely circulated, being transported at great cost and effort. Thus, this stone was a real status symbol flaunted by wealthy patrons. So the association of white marble with the royal patronage is hardly surprising. In addition to the physical characteristics that mostly guarantee durability, good workability, and a pleasing aesthetic result, the use of this material required a logistical effort that only a patron with significant means could ensure. In the 4th century BC, there was a systematic use of white marble by the many dynasts who exercised their power in the shadow of the Persian Empire in the Eastern Mediterranean, as the tombs of Lycia and the sarcophagi of Phoenicia demonstrate. Indeed, in a dynamic of competition, the elites of the regions of the Western Persian Empire promoted an increasing circulation of white marble from the Aegean Sea, the Aegean area. The Persian administrative system promoted advancement up the hierarchy based on one's achievements, a mechanism that triggered emulation amongst the elite throughout the entire Achaemenid period. The choice of a prestigious material such as marble was part of this dynamic. Thus, in the case of Western Anatolia and the Eastern Mediterranean, Persian rule could be identified as a factor that contributed to the large use of marble. From a technical point of view, the solution of combining different white marbles in the same monument adopted for the mausoleum of Halicarnassus was not isolated either. It was also used for the monument, for the narrated monument of Xanthos. This was a pragmatic approach aimed at exploiting the characteristics of each variety, in which the role of skilled craftsmen in the planning and realization of these tombs and their elaborate figurative programs is assumed. Freestanding sculptures, reliefs, architectural elements ideally required different varieties of marble for the best possible result. For example, Parian lignites was particularly suitable for freestanding sculpture. This approach reveals not only an articulated organization of the site construction, but also a progressive acquisition of deeper acquaintance with these stone materials. The marbles used for the mausoleum and the palace in Halicarnassus thus impose themselves as important element for the self-representation of Mausolus' power. It was meant to embody his rank, power, and ambitions. In my view, the case of the mausoleum of Halicarnassus demonstrates how different aspects of the tombs of this area, role in the landscape, visibility, materials, can shed light on social, political, and economic issues. So, to conclude, the iconographic aspects analyzed with the banqueting and hunting images offer an effective tool to investigate court dynamics. Representations of the court in all its components, dynasts, officials, and servants, had a precise function in the celebratory imagery of funerary monuments from our area. Dignitaries respecting dynastic authority and efficient servants contributed to the creation of positive images of the courts, the core for the different local potentates of the Eastern Mediterranean under the Persian rule. All this is expressed in the creation of a visual language with its own characteristics shared by many courts in this area. In this context, in this climate of sharing, at the same time competition, other aspects of the dynastic monuments present common elements: monumentality, role in the cityscape, relationship to surrounding landscape elements, materials used. The analysis of all these elements gives us a picture of a very dynamic area in the 4th century BC, capable of reusing multiple traditions, Greek, Persian, and of course local, with unique characteristics. Thank you very much for your attention.